story of a maximum security prison in Alabama that decided to take a risk, decided to do something so unusual that I think I could actually call it revolutionary. And I've been working with prisoners in the Boston area for many years. But in 1999, I went down to visit this prison in Alabama. And this is the story about what's been happening down there since. Donaldson Correctional Facility. It's deep in the Alabama countryside. It's known among the prisoners as the House of Pain. It's the end of the prison system. There's nowhere lower you can go in the Alabama prison system. 1,500 prisoners live inside. Many have life sentences. Many also have something called life without parole. And there's a heavy atmosphere of hopelessness and despair that saturates the place. The prison is surrounded by razor wire fencing, which actually looks very beautiful when the sun is shining on it. But don't be fooled by it. This is the last gate before going inside the prison. And once you pass through this gate, you begin to see the prisoners. Now, this is a gladiator world. Watch your back, be strong, hide your emotions, be ready to fight at a moment's notice. Big Ed, drug dealer, gang leader, he was just released from 4 years in solitary confinement. And he was afraid of no one, but actually he was afraid of himself and his bottled up anger. Grady, abandoned by his mother when he was a small boy. Life without parole for standing by and witnessing a murder and doing nothing to stop it, and then leaving the crime scene with the murderers. 8.5 years on death row, filled with anger and grief. Johnny ran away from home as a small boy following the accidental death of his baby sister. Spent most of the last 40 years in prison, and those have been years of violence and multiple attempts to escape from prison. Charles, 20 years for homicide. Larry, drug addict, serious heart disease, life without parole, terrified of being forgotten and dying behind bars. Omar, 3 strikes and you're out, life without parole. As a schoolboy, he and Condoleezza Rice were always the top students in the school. And then later, as a promising college student, drugs took him down a different path to armed robberies and drug addiction, filled with a sense of wasted promise, and like all the rest, trapped behind bars. Now, this is a really tough place. This prison is filled with people that society has deemed too dangerous or too dysfunctional to live on the outside. However, the prison environment is actually perpetuating those very behaviors that sent them there in the first place. And you should know that over 95% of prisoners are going to return to the streets and your neighborhoods. But I also learned on that first visit that nobody was happy with the situation at Donaldson. Nobody wanted to work there. It was always understaffed because nobody wanted to go to Donaldson. And nobody felt safe. The prisoners weren't safe. The staff wasn't safe. But I found that people were looking for a solution. And after my first visit to Donaldson, a radical idea began to spread. First, it spread among the prisoners, and then it spread among the staff. Maybe meditation could help. So they turned to an intensive, rigorous, ancient meditation program called Vipassana. And it's based on the teachings of the Buddha. And it requires 100 hours of meditation in silence and stillness over a 10-day period of time. And the director of treatment for the Alabama Department of Corrections led the charge. And there were a series of meetings between the prison staff and the Vipassana leadership. And in 2002, right in the heart of the Bible Belt, Vipassana was brought behind the walls of Donaldson Prison. East meets West in the Deep South. It was an amazing thing when it happened. Day 0, the prisoners must gather their belongings and bring them into the gym And the gymnasium was transformed into a meditation sanctuary. And everybody was about to be locked up together in the gym. Now in prison, you're triply or quadruply locked down anyway, and here they were behind another locked door. The teachers, of course, were afraid of the prisoners. Somebody had told them that these guys can kill you. But the prisoners were terrified of the teachers. They were thinking, who are these freaks who want to be locked inside prison with us? And then in the moments just before silence fell and the program began, the prisoners gathered together and they made a rallying cry, 20 in, 20 out, 20 strong. And they determined in that moment that nobody was going to drop out of that program, no matter what happened. And behind this locked door, their journey was about to begin. Alone together, seated on their meditation mats, riding on the waves of emotion and pain. For the first 3 days, they're taught the skill called anapana, which means focusing on the breath as it moves across the upper lip and in and out of the nostrils. For 30 hours, they do anapana. 30 hours in 3 days. And when the mind wanders, they have to come back to the breath over and over and over again. They were sweating and shaking and itching, trying to be still. And at the end of 30 hours, their minds were sharp and focused. And on day 4, they were taught the skill of vipassana. And this is what they must do for the next 7 days. They take the sharply focused mind and move it systematically through the body and keep moving it through the body, journeying into areas that had never been explored before. And as memories rose to the surface, they had to face those memories. Now, I've done this program myself, Vipassana, several times, and it's not easy. But to do it inside of prison, where everything is locked inside, nothing gets explored, that takes real courage. And the teachers said that they had never seen, in all their experience teaching Vipassana in centers around the world, they'd never seen anybody like these 20 prisoners. And as the trust grew between the teachers and the prisoners, the prisoners' work deepened. Grady was able to look up close at that crime, something he'd never been able to tolerate doing before. Big Ed, he had to face the fact that his daughter had died in a playground accident. And even though he'd been taken to her funeral in shackles, he still couldn't let himself come to the truth that she had died. It was too much to tolerate in prison. And then Wayne was unable to sit and focus. He was squirming, he was jumping, he was running from the mat. And finally, on day 6, he was given a choice by the teachers. Either he had to leave the program right then and there, or he had to sit and focus on whatever it was he couldn't look at that he'd been avoiding. And so finally, in that moment, with that wise advice, he sat and he went inside and he faced himself, really, for the first time. And then the program ended, and the men were about to walk out of a sanctuary and back into their chaotic lives as prisoners. And everybody was thinking, what are these guys going to be like? Who are they going to be today? And they walked out of that door, and they seemed to carry a sense of calm dignity. They couldn't be provoked or upset so easy. They seemed to have changed. And they formed a brotherhood. They called themselves, or they still call themselves, the Dhamma Brothers. And in the language of the Buddha, it means seekers of wisdom and truth. And they were loyal to their practice, even sometimes gathering twice a day to meditate together. And then one day, a phone call was placed to the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. And somebody said, you better watch out what's happening at Donaldson. Some of those prisoners are being turned into Buddhists. And that was all it took. The program was shut down, and the men were forbidden to meet or meditate, and Vipassana was outlawed at Donaldson. But many of them continued to gather and meditate. This is Ed's cell, and Ed and Charles on the bottom bunk, and that's Wayne on the top bunk. Johnny, finally able to quiet his restless spirit and be where he was, and to have his emotions and his memories without resorting to violence. And now just listen to the words of Charles and Larry as they say a little bit about their practices.
Almost like you find a state of inner peace. When you're in a volatile situation, and you know it's a volatile situation, but you know you can walk away because the choice is always there. No matter what, the choice is always there. Even when we choose to do the wrong thing, the choice is always there. So I think Vipassana has helped me to see the time I can take the choice before it gets out of control. And I'm able to do that now.
You interact with people different. I do. I know I do. I interact with people different. Where now I'm conscious of what my actions might do. And I think about what my actions might cause that person to feel toward me.
You're still the same person. What it is, you begin to recognize who you are. And by recognizing who you are, you learn that, hey, I got control. I can make choices that'll change the outlook, or to change the experience, or change the result of a situation or an experience. If I choose, whichever way you go, if you go the wrong way, then it's going to produce this. If you go the right way, then it's going to produce this. So once we recognize and accept who we are, you know, on that level, to say that there is a sense of acceptance, in the sense that you can't change other people, but you can get them to see you differently. And if they see you differently, then they begin to see themselves differently, because really the things that we don't like in other people is the things that we don't like in ourselves. So it becomes a sense of acceptance.
4 years after the shutdown, Vipassana was brought back inside Donaldson in 2006, and now 400 prisoners have been able to take this program. This has been a personal journey for me. I helped to initiate and establish the Vipassana program at Donaldson, and several years ago I released a documentary film and published a book about the story of the Dhamma brothers. But when I first started documenting this story, I thought maybe the Dhamma brothers can become teachers for us, because we don't hear from these people. We don't hear from these 2 million plus people who are incarcerated. We don't hear their voices. And I thought that they could teach us. And then I thought, no, that's silly. And actually, that's what I see happening right now with the story of the Dhamma brothers. Thank you.